My name is Gideon. I'm Stephen. I'm from the fair kingdom of Atlantia, and in Atlantia all things are sea-themed, because someone thought Atlantis was a good idea to base a kingdom on. Never mind that half the kingdom is inland. We serve the sea. All of our awards are named after sea things. And what drew me to the SCA at my first event was a really good story about spooky things that frankly kept me up all night, but were awesome. So you gotta have a good villain, and you gotta have something spooky. So I give you the story of the sea stag. No one speaks of the days of the missing children. Few like to remember such pain, but we bards bear that burden. We carry the stories of our kin. And long ago, long ago, when Atlantia was but a camp by the shore and a settlement on a hill, the East had given us lands. Lands they thought untamable. Lands they thought untenable. Lands they never thought they'd miss. But Atlantia grew, and Atlantia thrived through storm, through wind, through sun, through snow. No one told us there would be snow here, but And late one night when a storm raged, winds howled and waves crashed, the men on watch saw a figure, they thought, moving through the waves. And those who claim to remember seeing it say it was not the shape of a man, broad, hulking shoulders, covering a massive head with a gray woolen cowl, its gait strange as it moved through the sand and then was gone. As the watch dozed in a sleep that was not accustomed to them, this shape moved to the houses of Atlantia. Now, Atlantean families in those days were large. 5 sons, 7 daughters, because sons were needed to till soil and cast nets, and daughters were needed to make important decisions. So there were many of them. And where there were 5, this creature would take 3, placing them in a blue stitched bag with white shells, sleeping on a bed of sand. The entire child would slip inside, and he would move through the encampments. No door was locked to him. Now the souls of Atlantia were salty old men and women who slept deep, the decks of ship more home than any 4 walls and a roof. Miles away in Windmaster's Hill, it is said this same figure moved through tent and cabin, taking a child here, a child there, and disappearing into the forest. The next morning, mothers wailed. Fathers swore oaths. Parties were organized. Woods were beaten. Lakes were dragged. Seas were searched. No children were found. Years passed and wounds healed. The children never forgotten, but also never spoken of. Until one day, the East cast their eyes south. And instead of untamed woodlands and fallow fields, they saw thriving farms, fishing nets full of lobster, fishing nets full of river nets full of trout and salmon. And they thought this was a bad idea. What have we done? They crowned a prince. How long till they crown a king in their own right? So the Tiger Throne plotted. And the Tiger Throne said, yes, it is time they returned to rule under our claw, and sent a war band south. Now, Atlantia had mighty warriors, but our army was at that time at best a militia. Prince Lair the Harity sat the throne, wearing his coronet, wondering what would come. His land was thriving, trade was being established, and then one day the war band came. Massive knights in full plate armor, riding horses marked with the mark of the East, and they pressed Atlantia. Young Atlantia, rich Atlantia, still yet unproven in battle Atlantia. Women were rounded up and kept in one men in the other. Children, the most precious resource, fled to the forest in attempts to hide. The warband pressed south, harder and harder, to what would one day be Raven's Cove. And Prince Lahair made a stand. With 6 of his most valiant knights, they waited, facing down the eastern warband, when suddenly, from the sea, a great horn sounded. The Eastern Knights jumped back, thinking it some Atlantean trick. Maybe an ambush had been laid. The horn sounded again. This time the Atlanteans spun about, confused, as we often are, and looked at the sea, expecting an Eastern ambush, but no men came. At last, a third mighty blast came, and a figure emerged from the sea. Broad-shouldered, heavily cowled, crusted in coral and shells. In one hand, a triton shell horn, in the other, a gleaming silver trident. And he blew one final blast, and the sea exploded. With every wave that crashed on the shore revealed kneeling warriors, clad not in leather and steel and chain, but in the wood of sunken ships. Their visages, the massive jaws of sharks, their gauntlets, whale bones. Their boots spun in the gold of lost treasure. This was the sea made war. And one by one these creatures stood against the Eastern Warband. Their leader, this massive figure who had taken Atlantea's children so many years before, threw back his cowl, revealing the head of a great gray stag whose chest faded into fish scales of the sea, his antlers crusted with coral and lost gemstones. And with one great gesture and one blast of his horn, these creatures from the sea turned not on our Atlantean warriors, but pushed into the Eastern Warband. They moved twice as fast as any warrior, hit twice as hard as any, for they were born of the sea. The misty night air was light as feathers to them. You had to hit them 3 times as hard to get them to call the blow good, so you knew you were in Atlantia. And they crushed the Eastern Knights, sent them spiraling back. And the men of Atlantia were terrified, as we often are, and went about thinking, now is our time. Now the sea has come to reclaim the land that we have claimed. And then these horrible creatures removed their helms. And it is said that time passes differently beneath the waves. But fathers know sons when they see them. Mothers know daughters. The lost children of Atlantia had returned. Before the reunion could begin, the sea stag himself came forward and spoke to our prince. Land prince, he said, dry land. I have returned these to you that I have raised beneath the waves. They have stood against the immovable currents, lifted objects that you cannot fathom. They have crafted their armor and their craft from the very sea itself, and I give them to you. They will train your armies. They will raise your force, so these men will never raise hand against you again. And with that, the sea stag turned, and with the agility unthought for a creature of that size, leapt into the ocean and swam away. And on that day, Prince Lear was no fool. He established the Order of the Sea Stag, an award given to those who excel in teaching the art of chivalry and combat to those younger than them. And that medallion to this day is gray metal, marked with a silver stag's head and 2 crossed crescents, to remember the creature that we thought had stolen Atlantia's past, but had in fact ensured our future. Thank you.